Okay, hey, hi everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I hope you're doing well and staying out of the snow. I'll pick up the pace a little bit myself here to make up a little time and to let you move through your afternoon. I'm Bill Dvorak. I've been with CSols for 4 years. Before that, I was at Elon. We did a LIMS labware implementation there. Successfully, I worked at West Pharmaceutical Services, working in corporate compliance, and before that in lab systems, relationship management, validation type stuff for their LIMS and chromatography systems and related systems. I'm a chemist. I still write chemist on my income tax. I have experience with labware, StarLIMS, IDBS. I've worked in pharma my whole career. My bachelor's degree is from Lehigh. I went to San Francisco State, which I really liked. From a master's degree, picked up an MBA when I was at Warner Lambert, working there. They were under consent decree, so working with getting their systems up to speed. And then recently did the PMP cert, which is a fun project. Okay, let's get started. This cartoon sort of picks up on the theme, or shows the theme of, you know, when you buy something and there's a big chunk of it, or the piece that makes it work isn't included, battery's not included, looking beyond the informatics quote. So we're going to talk about, you know, what makes an informatics project successful and what is in and what is out of the quote that comes from the vendor. We're going to look at that through the lens of the key aspects of a project as CSols often looks at them, that is assessment, alignment, action, and adoption. And we'll talk about those as we encounter them. So here's a cartoon, a picture of the 4 key aspects. And it's important that leadership consider these aspects as early as possible in the project. And that's going to be sort of one of the recurring themes here. Really, a lot of the things we're talking about ought to be pulled forward rather than encountered later in a project in order to have success. So what's a vendor quote look like? Well, this is sort of just a mock-up here. Perhaps this is like a LIMS system, say. That's what I'm most familiar with. And there might be some license fees, a standard license, some functionality, maybe stability or environmental monitoring. Maybe there's some unique licensing associated with that. There might be some reports. That line would probably be better down under consulting hours because there's likely to be some canned reports, but there's also going to, you're going to require some customization for those. And so you'll have some maybe amount of hours quoted there for consulting time. And then there might be some vendor validation package that you may or may not purchase along that has some test scripts, say, functional testing, and also some training elements as well. So this is just sort of a mock-up of what a vendor quote looks like. You have the total, and then often away you go. When you've chosen your vendor, then this is what you would typically purchase. So in this vendor quote, from the perspective of the aspect of assessment, assessment is that part of the project where you would have looked at your current systems to figure out what the requirements are that are implemented there, to compare that with the requirements that you intend to have in the new world with your new IT, and also that includes the things that you won't change, the requirements common to the current solution and the future solution. Similarly, you would have looked for project barriers, perhaps the project risk factors, and begun to mitigate those risks. And you have a clear definition of the future state. The clearer that definition, the better off you're going to be. And the business benefits associated with that vision would be quantified, probably preliminary budgeting or even final budgeting at a high level would be completed. Now, the vendor quote really doesn't include these activities. In fact, the vendor quote is probably the result of these steps, this analysis that you've done early on to do your selection, to state your business case. So out of that business case came this vendor quote or set of quotes from which you may be making your final selection. So some points for consideration